G'day. Welcome to the third and final video in the Thought Play series. Before we get into it, I just want to go through a couple of bits of housekeeping. Firstly, I just want to thank everybody who's commented and liked the videos, and particularly those of you who've had the courage to share your stories. It's been really inspiring. Thank you. Secondly, if you do have overexcitabilities, there is the Adults with Overexcitabilities Facebook group that you can join. If you want to connect with other people who have OEs, feel free to join us over on Facebook. And third, I just want to announce that I have set up a blog at www.tragicgift.com. And that's a personal blog and website of mine that I've started to share little bits about Dabrowski's theories, links to other resources and also to these videos, and also a personal blog where I've been sharing some of my more personal and deeper stories on some issues that I'm not quite ready to put all over YouTube. But back to today's video. Now, we've looked at the basics of thought play and the theory, and also using thought play to pull apart complicated ideas. But today I want to talk about putting together ideas in a more complex fashion. Now, you might be asking, why would anyone need to put complex ideas together? Even seemingly polar schools of thought can be put together to be collaborated into new ideas and new theories. After all, innovation doesn't come from picking one choice over the other. Innovation and new ideas come from either inventing something completely new or taking existing ideas and using them in new ways. And when it comes to thought, we can't do that by choosing one side of an argument over another. Sometimes, in order to get new and innovative ideas, we have to be able to combine seemingly opposite thoughts together. And that's what I'm going to do today. We can start to appreciate the fact that everybody has their own experience of reality. I think appreciating diversity in thought and accommodating for other people's experience of reality is particularly important when we talk about the theory of positive disintegration and overexcitabilities, because Dabrowski talks about empathy and building subject-object perspectives on things. Subject-object thinking basically means that you go from viewing yourself purely subjectively and everybody else objectively, which means basically I am the center of the universe and everybody else is just sheeple, to a school of thought where you start to view your own behaviors and yourself objectively and everybody else subjectively. As we start to view others as unique individuals with their own personality, with their diverse ideas and thoughts, and their unique attributes, we start to develop real empathy. And in a world today that seems to be lacking in cohesiveness, empathy, and people coming together, in other words, while the world remains divisive and split, I think that subject-object thinking is very important. So today, in order to demonstrate how opposite thoughts can be brought together, I'm going to use one of the most stickiest and divisive issues in human history through use of a metaphor. And I'm sure you will pick up along the way which issue I'm talking about, but it's one that's had human beings fighting each other for hundreds and thousands of years. Now, if you remember from previous videos, thought play involves taking apart previous ideas and systems that we thought were stuck together, rearranging them and putting them on a base of logic. So today, I'm going to take a bunch of pieces that have already been pulled apart by society and see if I can find a way to put them back together, looking for patterns and similarities. And I'm going to try to put them together on a basis of logic, which comprises of three components. The fact that everybody has their own version of reality or their own perspective. The fact that there are some things in life that just simply cannot be proven. And the fact that knowledge is fluid. And if you want to know exactly how fluid knowledge is, I suggest you go and look up epistemology. Go onto Wikipedia, not now, after the video, and look up epistemology, and you'll realize that what we know as fact, it's not really as clear-cut as you would first think. So in my analogy today, I'm going to tell a little story of my trip to the existential zoo. Now, when I went to the existential zoo, I noticed that one animal in particular was very popular, the great mysterious tiger. Now, no one has actually seen this tiger because for some reason the idiots that built the enclosure didn't put the viewing windows low enough and no one can actually get up there and see themselves. Some people have jumped and think they've caught glimpses, but everybody thinks that they know what the tiger looks like. But the plain fact of the matter is, no one's going to know what that tiger looks like until the day that they climb in the tank with it. And to all accounts, once you get in there, there's no coming back. Now, several people with an interest in zoology, have speculated as to the nature of this mysterious tiger. There was a unique thing that had me very puzzled, and that was the fact that there seemed to be more than one side to the tiger viewing tank. And everybody seemed to acknowledge that there was more than one side, but many people just walked up to the same side of the tank day after day and never questioned what was going on at the other sides. Now, when I first went to the zoo, I arrived at the left side of the tank. And the people on the left side of the tank had a very clear view of what they thought the tiger was like. They said it was bipedal, that it had 2 legs from what they could see, 1 front leg and 1 hind leg. It also had 1 nostril and 1 eye, so it was monocular in its vision. They said it had a long striped body and it was asymmetrical and had a body that always ends in a tail. And from their perspective, the tiger always faced left. Now, for quite a while, I accepted this was what the tiger looked like. But after a time, I realised that I was never going to get a true picture of the tiger unless I started exploring what people thought the tiger looked like from other sides of the tank. So the next port of call for me was the rear of the tank. Now, the people at the rear of the tank had a very different view of what the tiger looked like. They said it didn't have a face at all, and they couldn't see any legs. It had a mass that might be a body. And one thing was for certain, that it did end in a tail, but they weren't even sure that the tiger was alive. Well, that certainly was a very different view. No face, not alive. That was their conception of what the tiger was like. But for me, I still had to keep exploring. So I went round to the right side of the tank. Now, funnily enough, the people at the right side of the tank had a very similar view to the people at the left side of the tank. They also believed that the tiger was bipedal and it had 2 legs, 1 at the front and 1 at the rear, that it had 1 nostril and 1 eye and a long striped body. They also thought that the tiger was asymmetrical and it ended in a tail. But there was a key difference between the people on the left side and the right side, in the fact that the people on the right side of the tank were convinced the tiger does not face left, it always faces right. So the plot thickens. 2 opposite sides of the tank who think that the tiger looks nearly exactly the same, except for that key difference. So I kept going, and I went round to the front of the tank. Now, unlike the people at the rear of the tank, the people at the front of the tank were definitely convinced that the tiger was alive, but they had a hugely different perspective on the tiger than the people at the left and the right sides. In their view, the tiger was definitely bipedal, but it had 2 legs, 1 on the left and 1 on the right, not a front and rear leg. They were also convinced that the tiger had more than 1 eye. In fact, it had 2 and its vision was binocular. They also believed in more than 1 nostril. So they believed in a number of facial features. Their view of the body was entirely different because from their perspective, the body was short. And they thought that the tiger was symmetrical, a radically different view from all the other sides of the tank. They thought the tiger always faced to the front, and because they saw the tiger from the front, they weren't convinced that the tiger had a tail at all. In fact, there was no end of the tiger in sight from them. The tiger could have gone on forever. Taking all this on board, I walked away from that existential zoo, being a very confused person. But what would happen if I took all those views and combined them together? Rather than seeing views of the tiger as conflicting, I could choose, if I wanted to view all aspects of the tiger as true. And this is the picture that I've come up with. I think that the tiger does have two eyes, and it does have two nostrils. But I also think that it has a tail. And with the legs, well, maybe everybody's right. Maybe on the left side there is one front and one hind leg. And maybe on the right side there is one front and one hind leg. And that's why the people from the front of the tank can also see two legs, which would mean in reality that the tiger is a quadruped and it has four legs. And maybe everybody's right. And perhaps the direction that the tiger is facing and the perceived length of the tiger's body isn't necessarily an aspect of the tiger itself, but dependent on the viewer's perspective. Now, isn't that a weird thought? That some aspects of the tiger aren't dependent on the tiger itself, but on the perspective of the viewer in question. And for me, this raised more questions. Could the people at the rear of the tank be right as well? Perhaps the tiger is not alive. What if it's animatronic? And if it is alive, is it a mammal like us? Could it die one day? Does it need to eat? Does it get angry and upset and happy and sad? And if there's a tiger in our existential zoo, are there other towns very far away who have their own existential zoos and their own tigers? Because for people that live in a galaxy, a township far, far away, isn't it entirely possible that they are completely unaware of our tiger? What do they view in their zoo? What has this weird story about tigers taught us? First of all, everybody has their own reality and their own perspective, and we can only see the world from our own. And when we think about the fact that one person's experience doesn't necessarily need to negate another one, we can learn a valuable lesson. And it's a lesson that we've been learning since the COVID lockdown. And that is that there is an experience or an event that we can all go through, and everybody can have a different perspective on it. People have reacted to lockdown very differently. Some people have enjoyed the isolation, other people haven't. And we're all going through the same experience. And differences in perspective should teach us that Dabrowski was right about the power of subject-object thinking. That once we start viewing ourselves objectively, insofar as our experience is no more valid than anyone else's, and once we start viewing others with more subjectivity and viewing them as unique individuals who have very valid experiences, we can build on empathy. We can be less dismissive of other people's perspectives and know that just because two perspectives are different doesn't necessarily mean that either of them are wrong. And in a world that's severely lacking in empathy and love sometimes, I think it's a particularly worthy personal endeavour to try and build this within ourselves. And for those of you with overexcitabilities, I'll leave you with one last thought. When you experience the world at volume 11 and everything is amped up, remember that if you have some trauma in your life or some experience, just because you went through that differently, more intensely, doesn't necessarily invalidate your experience or your feelings about that trauma. Other people may have been through similar things to you, but they are not you. And perhaps they recovered from their experience more quickly, or they didn't quite feel the same about it. It doesn't devalue what you went through or how you feel about it. So try and forgive yourself for feeling the world at volume 11 all the time. Understand it may be harder for you to let go and move on. And whatever you do, don't invalidate your own pain and your own feelings just because they differ to someone else's. But what would I know? Because I'm no expert. I'm just one person with OE sharing very strange ideas on tigers. in order to try and spread some happiness. See you later.